When billionaire Arjun Malhotra unlocked the door of his mansion past midnight, his pulse carried a strange heaviness. The echo of his shoes across the marble floor felt louder than usual, almost accusing. He told himself he was only tired after the long trip, but something in the air felt different. He had walked into this house countless times, but tonight the silence seemed alive, charged, whispering that nothing would ever be the same again. The air carried the faint scent of wine and jasmine. He glanced at the console table by the stairs and noticed a half-empty glass, lipstick pressed onto its rim. His brows furrowed. Ria never drank alone. He climbed the staircase, his hand brushing against the mahogany railing, his heart pounding harder with every step. At the landing, he spotted Ria's scarf crumpled on the floor, something she never would have left there if she had been alone. A sharp knot tightened in his stomach that he moved toward the bedroom, his footsteps slower now, his breaths shallow. He pushed the door open just enough for a sliver of light to pierce the darkness. In that sliver, his world shattered. Ria was there, her hair undone, her face flushed, leaning into the embrace of a man Arjun had trusted more than anyone outside of his own family. Kabir. His closest friend, his business partner, the man he had considered a brother. The sight pinned him in place. For a moment, he couldn't breathe. He thought perhaps exhaustion had conjured some cruel hallucination. But then Ria turned her head, her eyes wide in horror, and Kabir froze like a thief caught under a spotlight. The truth was undeniable, and it sliced through Arjun's chest with merciless precision. Ria's voice broke the silence first. Arjun, it's not what you think. Her words trembled, but her tears betrayed her. Kabir's face carried no excuses, only shame. Arjun stepped forward, his fists tightening, his voice low and thunderous. Not what I think. Then tell me, what exactly is this, Ria? What is my best friend doing in my bed with my wife? Kabir tried to speak. Arjun, listen, you were never around. She was lonely. It just happened. The justification burned worse than silence. Arjun's laugh was hollow, bitter, a man on the edge of rage but too controlled to unleash it. So my years of sacrifice, my sleepless nights building a life for us, meant nothing? You chose betrayal as your answer to loneliness? Ria fell to her knees, sobbing. She reached for him, but he stepped back, her touch suddenly poisoned to his skin. The images of their first meeting, their wedding, the vows they had exchanged, all of it now mocked him. He turned his gaze to Kabir, the man who had been at his side in boardrooms, who had toasted to victories, who had known his deepest fears. You, Arjun said, his voice shaking with fury, were the brother I never had. And this is what you do with the trust one gave you? Kabir lowered his head, speechless. The silence grew unbearable. Arjun couldn't stay in the room another second. His chest felt like it would burst, his mind screamed for escape. Without another word, he turned and walked out. Ria's cries followed him down the hallway, but he didn't look back. The night outside was colder than he remembered, or maybe it was just his blood turning to ice. He got into his car, slammed the door, and drove with no destination, the city lights blurring past him. Every memory of Ria crashed through his mind, the way she laughed when they first met at a charity gala, how she held his hand during his first big business failure, the way she had whispered promises under the stars. Promises she had just broken. The betrayal was double-edged. It wasn't only his wife, it was also his friend. Together, they had taken from him not just love, but trust. He gripped the steering wheel tighter, his knuckles white, his eyes burning. The empire he had built, the billions he had earned, none of it could shield him from this devastation. In that moment, he wasn't a titan of industry. He was just a man abandoned in the cruelest way. That he kept driving until the skyscrapers gave way to quiet streets and the quiet streets faded into the coastline. The horizon shimmered faintly with the first hints of dawn. He pulled over near a secluded stretch of beach and walked across the cold sand, his shoes sinking into the ground with every step. Finally, he sat, staring at the restless waves, the vast ocean echoing the storm inside him that he tried to process what had happened. Was there a sign he had missed? Had Ria been unhappy for longer than he realized? He remembered her telling him once, softly, "You're always married to your work, Arjun." He had brushed it off, thinking love didn't need constant tending if it was real. But perhaps she had been crying for help all along, and Kabir had been there to answer the call he ignored. The thought only deepened his anguish, yet, even as he tried to blame himself, the sharp sting of betrayal cut deeper. Ria could have spoken, could have confronted him with her loneliness. Kabir could have respected the bond they shared. Instead, they chose secrecy, weakness, and betrayal. He pressed his hands into the sand, fighting the urge to scream. His empire, his power, his name, none of it mattered now. He was just a man stripped bare, left with nothing but pain. The sun began to rise, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, colors too beautiful for a night so cruel. He felt as though the universe mocked him with its indifference. He stayed there until the city woke, until the streets filled with the noise of another day, until his tears had dried into a numb silence. When he finally stood, his suit crumpled and his eyes hollow, he knew one truth: life as he had known it was gone. When he returned to the mansion, the staff looked at him with cautious eyes, sensing something had shifted. Ria was waiting for him in the living room, her face pale, her hands trembling. She rushed toward him, desperation in every movement. "Arjun, please, listen to me. I made a mistake. I was weak. But I still love you. Don't throw everything away because of one night." Her words rang hollow, echoing against the fortress of pain inside him. He stared at her, his silence heavier than any reply. No explosion, no anger this time, only emptiness. The woman he had trusted with his heart was now a stranger, and he could not summon the strength to believe her. Kabir's absence the next morning confirmed what Arjun already knew. His friend had chosen to disappear rather than face the man he betrayed. Arjun's office received Kabir's resignation without explanation, and suddenly, the empire built on partnership was his alone. News spread quietly through the city's elite. Whispers filled cocktail parties and business meetings. Some pitied him, others smirked, enjoying the fall of a man who seemed untouchable. Every glance, every whispered word was a fresh wound, but he bore it in silence. He refused to let the world see him break, even as he bled inside, and so began the days of reckoning. Days where the weight of betrayal sat heavy on his chest. Nights where the emptiness of his mansion echoed louder than any sound. He kept moving, kept breathing, but he knew he was only surviving, not living. He had wealth, power, influence, but no trust, no love, no peace. That night when he opened the door past midnight had stolen more than his marriage. It had stolen his belief in people, his belief in promises, his belief in home. And as he stared at the glittering skyline from his office window, he wondered if he would ever feel whole again. Arjun rose the next morning with eyes that had not closed all night. The emptiness beside him in the bed was no longer strange, but a symbol carved deep into his soul. His empire demanded his attention, contracts awaited his signature, markets awaited his decisions, yet for the first time in years he felt no hunger for victory. He walked through corridors lined with art, chandeliers glittering above, servants greeting him with forced cheer, and none of it stirred even a flicker of pride. Wealth had become nothing but walls trapping his sorrow. Ria tried to hold his gaze at breakfast, her trembling hands reaching for the porcelain cup as if tea could hide the storm inside her. She spoke with desperation, promising change, swearing love, begging for a chance. He listened with the detachment of a man already buried. He gave no reply. The silence was heavier than words, and that silence became his shield. The woman who once lit his nights with laughter now appeared only as a shadow of betrayal, and every word from her lips fell lifeless at his feet. Kabir disappeared, his name erased from company papers, his office emptied overnight. The man who once fought alongside him for every deal, who shared champagne at every milestone, who knew his victories and failures, had left without a trace. And though the absence was expected, it cut no less deep. Betrayal had destroyed not just a marriage but a brotherhood, and in its ashes Arjun discovered that loneliness inside wealth is louder than any crowd. Whispers followed him in corridors of power. He heard them in hushed voices at parties, saw them in glances traded across dinner tables. People who once envied him now pitied him. Others savored his humiliation, proof that money cannot buy loyalty. He bore it in silence, not because it did not wound him, but because anger would only prove their gossip true. Pride demanded composure, and composure became his armor, but nights remained merciless. Alone in his vast bedroom, he stared at the ceiling until dawn, his chest heavy with questions that had no answers. Was it his neglect that drove her away? Was he so blind, so consumed with ambition, that he ignored her pain? Or was betrayal inevitable, woven into the nature of people who could never resist desire? His mind wrestled with guilt and rage, his heart torn between blame and despair. It was during one of these restless nights that he wandered into the garden of his mansion. The gardener, an old man who had served the estate for decades, offered him tea in a chipped clay cup. Arjun, who had been drinking from crystal his entire adult life, accepted without hesitation. The warmth of that simple tea pierced through his coldness more than any luxury could. The old man spoke little, but his quiet presence reminded Arjun of something he had forgotten. Life's value was not measured in profit margins or gold but in the simple honesty of connection. This seed grew within him. He began spending time with the staff, asking about their families, their struggles, their joys. He rode one evening with his driver instead of sitting behind tinted glass, listening to stories of villages where children walked miles to school. He shared bread with cooks in the kitchen, laughing faintly for the first time in months. With every small act, he reconnected with a humanity wealth had hidden from him. Through one of his foundations, he attended an event for underprivileged children. It was there he met Mira, a teacher whose eyes carried warmth that no sorrow could extinguish. She spoke passionately of her students, of dreams that bloomed in classrooms with leaking roofs and broken benches. Her voice was not desperate, but strong, filled with conviction that love and patience could change lives. Arjun, who had forgotten how to believe in anything beyond contracts and betrayals, felt her words settle into him like rain on parched soil. That he found himself drawn to her sincerity. She asked nothing of him except to listen, and when he did, she listened back. There was no judgment in her eyes when he confessed fragments of his story, no curiosity laced with greed. She looked at him not as a billionaire, not as a broken man, but simply as another human being. That simple act of seeing him without title or scandal became his quiet salvation. Ria, however, refused to fade. She appeared at his office unannounced, her eyes swollen from tears, pleading for forgiveness. She reminded him of their years together, of love once real, of memories they had built. She claimed her mistake was weakness, not the absence of love. He listened in silence again, his face unreadable. But inside, he knew that forgiveness could not restore shattered trust. He could rebuild empires, but not broken vows. The day he signed the divorce papers, he did so with steady hands. There was no anger left, only finality. He gave her dignity, refraining from public humiliation, ensuring she walked away with security and respect. For all her betrayal, she had once been part of his dreams, and he refused to reduce those years into ashes of vengeance. He closed that chapter not with fury, but with quiet resolve, and with that closure, he began to write a new chapter. His empire no longer centered only on profits and expansion. He redirected resources toward building schools where none existed, hospitals in towns long forgotten, and homes for children who had none. The newspapers that once whispered scandal now carried headlines of transformation. The city that once pitied him began to respect him anew, this time not for his wealth, but for his heart. Mira walked beside him during these journeys. She visited construction sites, encouraged children to dream, and stood with him in the heat and dust of villages far from the glitter of his world. She became his mirror, reminding him of the man he was becoming rather than the man he had lost. Their bond grew not from desperation but from mutual respect, care, and honesty. Whether it would become love did not matter then. What mattered was that he was no longer walking alone, that he stood one evening on a stage built in the courtyard of a new school, surrounded by laughter of children chasing each other, their joy echoing against the setting sun. He looked at the crowd, villagers, workers, teachers, and felt a calm he had never known. For years he had thought victory was measured in numbers, towers, and recognition. Now he realized true victory was measured in smiles and gratitude. As he held the hand of a child who clung to him with trust, he reflected on his journey. He had lost what he thought was his world, only to discover the world he truly needed. Betrayal had carved deep scars into him, but those scars had not destroyed him. They had redirected him, guiding him toward a purpose far greater than himself. That he no longer craved the empty applause of high society. He no longer chased the illusion of perfection in love. He had found something sturdier, something real, the strength to rise after being broken, the courage to forgive without forgetting, and the wisdom to build a future that served not just him, but countless others. That night when he had come home late, he thought he had lost everything. In truth, it was the beginning of finding himself. And as laughter rang around him and the horizon burned gold, he knew his story was no longer about betrayal. It was about rebirth, about resilience, about choosing compassion over bitterness. It was about a man who lost a wife and a friend, but found humanity, hope, and a new reason to live.